Okay, so.
It even lets you.
Very good. All right, we have a flag in the corner. Can we all please rise to the flag? Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to thank people for joining us tonight for our public hearing on the Code of Conduct. And this is a procedural step that we need to take before we adopt Code of Conduct. And Ms. Adams, are you ready to? Now, I don't know if she's being taped, will people be able to see the
Yes.
presentation
Yes.
as she goes through it?
Yep, everything that comes through the WebEx system gets recorded. So I'm about to share it for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, so you
Yeah.
want that?
So I can have it here, and I will be able to share that for her. I will pull it up here for the board just momentarily, and we will be ready.
And I think we'll be heading to about page 13.
Okay. Okay, so do you see it? Are you seeing your work, Ms. Adams?
Yeah. So we see the first page. So yes, we can scroll up to 13. I will, I know it's a little small on the screen for the viewers. I will kind of take you through a little bit of the narrative of some of the changes. So good evening, everyone. So Ms. Vera and I worked on some revisions to the Code of Conduct as requested by the board. In anticipation, as you know, we've been speaking about and working on a plan to integrate restorative practices and restorative justice into our process and policy. And we've talked a little bit about that. We've had some presentations in the past, and we'll update you a little more. I will speak a little bit about restorative practices because that is going to be one of the changes in the policy in terms of it's an addition, adding the language. So as we transition into being able to use restorative practices in both settings, elementary school and high school, we need to have that in our Code of Conduct as possible remedial responses. So in general, restorative practices, and you'll see the definition there. This is an update to some of the definition parts of the Code of Conduct. And it refers to the use of strategies that build relationships within a school community and help to repair the harm done by student wrongdoing through a multi-level system. And the idea of restorative practices, if you're new to this, if you haven't heard some of other presentations, is that part of the process includes face-to-face meetings where participants in those meetings often form a circle and participate in facilitated conversation. There are parts and practices in restorative practices that don't use the circle process, but over time, circles may be a part of some of our practice. And so the next piece is just to include some language to help people become familiar with and to include the use of, these are the traditional circles that are used in restorative practices. This is a pretty common piece. So while restorative practices at a district and building level are somewhat can be customized to the community and kind of the not only the student community, but in terms of your scheduled day and how they're integrated in the day, they're somewhat customized to the setting of the district, and they might look a little different from school to school or in different regions, parts of the country and or world. But these are the pretty much the common aspects. So the level there, that would be a discussion of level 1, our community circles. Those are primarily used for community building. They're most often used in the classroom and other school settings to build relationships and create a sense of community among the stakeholders that are involved. So those circles could be used with students, faculty. We've on occasion used them with our faculty already just to start getting used to kind of how they work. Or it could be a mixture of stakeholders, parents, students, and faculty, whoever agrees to participate in that process. Level 2 restorative circles are sometimes used to resolve conflict in a small group setting. So that might be over time. Again, this is a very slow transition to use this. It might be a year or two before we get to some of these. As where, say, for example, a student might, there might be a conflict or a disruption in a classroom setting, and we may want to use a restorative circle to kind of help have a more structured conversation about maybe what occurred in that conflict between possibly the teacher, maybe some of the students, and myself facilitating that circle, or another counselor could possibly be involved or facilitate that circle. And then finally, a restorative conference is really most office level 3. It's considered the highest tier, and that's used as a response to a more serious incident, and is often used to come to possibly an agreement or actions that would be taken to repair harm caused by the student misconduct. And sometimes there's a formal written agreement that might be created out of that process as well. So this revision here is just to include the restorative language to define restorative practices and give some information about those different types of circles, so that over time, if those were used as part of a process to complement traditional discipline, I'll talk about that a little more in a moment, that people are familiar, you have a resource to go back and look at the definitions of these circles. Also, we would include these in our student handbooks as well. So those, you'll also see those. This code must be part of the student handbook as well. Further down in the Code of Conduct, it outlines discipline, procedures, and penalties. So restorative practices aren't a replacement for traditional discipline. They go hand in hand, and really it's the piece to help. Most often we think of disciplinary procedures and penalties as they're used here. That's a more traditional terminology, that if there's some type of student misconduct, then there's disciplinary action. So there still would be disciplinary action. So there aren't changes in those aspects of this code, but it offers alternatives to those penalties if over time, as we integrate restorative practices over the next few years into the district and into our buildings, then we can use these as an alternative to penalties. So I'm just going to read through this for people who might be on the phone. It states, as an alternative to these penalties, students may be offered and may choose to participate in restorative conferences, which may result in a written agreement identifying the actions that a student will take to repair the harm done by their misconduct. If a student follows through on the agreed upon actions in the agreement, if there is one, the referral, 1, may be considered resolved, or 2, the number of days of detention, in-school suspension, or out-of-school suspension may be reduced without further penalty. The use of restorative conferences will occur at the discretion of the principal and his or her designee. Students are not required to participate, but are encouraged to do so in lieu of further disciplinary action. So before we move on, just to clarify a little bit more about that. So I'll give you an example. A student, maybe there was some misconduct that caused some harm or a major disruption in a classroom, or maybe caused some conflict or harm to another student. And if that student, so maybe that misconduct might incur 2 days of in-school suspension or several days of out-of-school suspension. If the student agrees, all the parties need to agree, but if the student agrees to participate in that restorative conference, no one is forced, again, to participate, but oftentimes there comes to some resolutions and understandings in that conference. So if a student participated in that on their second day of in-school suspension, then maybe the third day then would be considered to be waived, or the issue would then be resolved, kind of, for lack of a better term, time served. So it allows students to have an incentive to participate in the restorative conference, because in the end, what we want is a change of behavior to repair harm, and we hope to improve relationships. This could also be used with maybe a misconduct in the classroom, or if there's conflict between a student and teacher, that they're able to come together in that process with a facilitator or other parties involved, and have be able to hear each other and have opportunities for both sides to speak and possibly understand each other better and maybe repair some harm that is done. And then that allows the student to re-enter the classroom sooner. Sometimes there might be a written agreement. If the student falls through on what was agreed upon, then again, they would be able to return to school or the classroom sooner. So again, it doesn't replace traditional discipline. It works hand in hand, but with the idea that we're working and have our mind, we're more mindful of repairing relationships and harm and trying to reduce the opportunity for that to happen again, either that conflict or disruptions in the classroom. So then on the next page, those went through, there were 12 possible penalties, again, as they were listed here. And those are what traditionally have been used that are not highlighted. And as part of this process, we added 2 more in that first, that restorative conference, just that could be an option as well. And that might be in the resolution or what we call the disposition of the referral. But also in there, we added what's called a structured day. So below there, I'll go back to the change to detention in a minute, but below that, you can see the addition. So that's the definition section. So it talks a little bit more and defines what a structured day is. And what a structured day is that we added in is it's really just a combination of some of those other, again, for lack of a better term, penalties. So the idea is that we want to have an opportunity to have students as much as possible to not be removed from instruction. Sometimes there's a disruption in the classroom, and that sometimes there needs to be a break for everyone for a day or two. And in some cases, an in-school suspension or removal from instruction may need to occur until we can have a restorative conference or kind of work on those relationships and how students can re-enter, and so we can kind of resolve whatever the issue was in that setting. But sometimes there are misbehaviors that occur in the unstructured settings, in the hallways, in the cafeteria, on the school bus, and other places. And at times where we might, and my detention may not be significant enough of a penalty, we might assign in-school suspension, which then takes the student out of the classroom and away from instruction. So the structured day is kind of an alternative to in-school. It's maybe a step between detention and in-school, where it's a combination. So a student could be assigned a structured day, so they would be able to go to their classes, but the idea is that there's structure, they have a little less kind of independence throughout the day, so their passing time would be controlled. So maybe at the end of a class period, the student has to wait until if it was a junior, senior high school, they would have to possibly wait till everyone passes and then be permitted to pass to their class, to have maybe a little, to not interact and have social time or have an opportunity for a conflict to occur again in the hallway. Instead of going to lunch, they would have lunch detention in the ALE room where in-school suspension occurs. And then they would also, if it was a secondary student, that if they had study hall, they would have study hall, more of a restricted study hall in the ALE room. And then finally, they would have detention at the end of the day. So the idea is if part of during some of that restricted time or during that day, we would hopefully want to try to have a conference with the other parties involved. And maybe if we participated in that, we came to a resolution or an agreement of some actions that could be taken, the student might be able then to earn back the detention. Or if it was multiple days of a structured day, again, they can earn some of that back. So it gives them the incentive to come together and try to work to a resolution and repair relationships. And the restorative conference, again, is that's just a repeat of the definition that we had earlier in that other section. And the only other recommended change to this document for this year was we just revised the detention section to include lunch detention. So I think everybody understands that, generally we often use lunch detention, but we wanted just to clean up the language to include after school or regular lunch detention, so that detention could occur either during lunch or after school. And of course, kind of in this hybrid setting, a lot of these may or may not occur. They may look a little different in how they're executed, but that is really the updates, and those are the recommended changes that Ms. Vieira and I have. The only other thing I would say to the structured day, do you want to talk a little bit, Karen, about what the structured day might look like for an elementary student?
Well, it's definitely going to be different than the high school is. But the idea is, again, so they're in there for their academics. We don't want them to miss those pieces. But maybe lunch will be with me. PE might be spent helping to reorganize something, or, working on something specific with the coach rather than the actual participation. It's something we're still kind of looking at, and we'll kind of discuss what we think would be the best. And I think each student, it might look different for as well. So again, for us, it's really the point of them not missing out on the academics, because we all know that when, you impose some of these, for lack of a better word, punishment or, consequences for action, we end up pulling the kids out of school, and then they miss the work, they fall behind, and the struggle continues. So we're trying to eliminate that. And being able to pull the kids together to meet and talk about it and to process it, really, I think, especially at the elementary level, is going to help build that kind of a relationship with the concept of when an issue arises, rather than that instant, like, oh, great, I'm going to have to sit in school suspension, and the struggle continues. So we're really just trying to eliminate that.
So those, I believe, I'm just skimming through. And then on the next page was just to include the abbreviation ISS next to in-school suspension. So if that was used in the code at all, then people were able to associate that with in-school suspension. So those are the recommended revisions and changes for this year. And we recommend to adopt the rest of the code of conduct as is.
Thank you. Dr. Glover, how many people from the public were able to log in? Do we have to?
Right now we have 20 people on.
Okay. I'd like to invite anybody that has any questions or comments or concerns about the code of conduct. This is an opportunity to have a conversation. Does anybody have a question or a concern? Is there anybody indicating that?
Nope, nothing in chat.
Is anybody here at board level? Is there any questions or concerns about the amended?
I guess I have a question, and maybe you covered it, Ms. Adams, and I missed it, but with these 12, now 14 different options, they're somewhat sequential, but not entirely, right? So you kind of start at the top, but you could easily jump around. You tend to go from top to bottom, but could jump over some, and some would not be relevant. Is that correct? I mean, they're numbered 1 to 14, but they're not.
Right. Those are, and if I'm not understanding your question correctly, please clarify, but those are they're in no particular order. I put those in the middle. I debated about just adding them to the end, but it did seem like there was a little bit of progression, but that was the order they were in. I don't know how long they've been in that order, and I can't really speak to however that was developed, what the rationale was putting them in that order, but I wouldn't say it's meant to imply that that is the progression of, I guess, penalty disposition. It really, as is indicated there, and more specifically in our student handbook, there really depends on the type, nature of the infraction as to kind of what might be dispensed in terms of, again, that kind of more consequential or penalty type of disposition. So I'm not sure if I answered
No,
that.
that's perfect. It kind of looks like it's quasi-sequential or,
Somewhat.
Permanent suspension is at the bottom for a reason and verbal warning is at the top for a reason, but in
Right.
between there's a fair bit of.
Right, right. And I would say that somewhat, and that's why I tried to put those in the middle. I thought putting them at the end might appear to be a little confusing. I think, just a comment related to that, and sorry, I'm not looking at the camera, but I'm looking just a little larger on my document on my other screen. But, 7, 8, and 9, suspension from transportation, athletic participation, and social or extracurricular activities. Those are really kind of sometimes specific to the nature of the infraction. So, a lot of times that suspension from athletic participation is related specifically to maybe a violation of the athletic code or something that might have occurred, related to an athletic event. And same with those extracurriculars. Transportation, that's one that, and Karen could, add to this, but I think we have a similar philosophy that, that's something that transportation suspension is not something that we use a lot unless it's a very egregious act. And we've really had discussions with the parents because we recognize that transportation to and from school can it's not easy for people. So it's something that we're very deliberate and have a lot of conversations with the family about. A lot of times we'll go to assigned seat and maybe some other things like that. But so those 7, 8, and 9, I would say, are not used as often. And same with 10, suspension of other privileges. So that's kind of why it does seem a little out of order. But other than that, it probably does show a progression. That removal from classroom, I think, really, that's a little late in the game. Usually, sometimes that might occur. Sometimes students are removed from the classroom just to kind of reduce the disruption at the time. It gives an opportunity for everyone to cool down and kind of have a conversation. Sometimes that doesn't even get noted necessarily in the discipline process. But for the most part, it's a relatively good sequence.
Perfect, thank you.
Is there anybody that has any additional questions or comments?
I do have a couple, but I think I'll wait till we're discussing
Discussing
it
it?
later in the meeting, not doing it in the public hearing. We'd ask again, just in case anybody didn't hear,
Yeah.
that the public knows they have an opportunity.
This is a public hearing. It's specifically designed for us to hear people's comments and concerns about the code of conduct. If there is anybody in the public who would like to share. Is that feedback here or?
It's Ms. Adams. I just muted her.
I didn't know hopefully that's not interfering with people hearing me, but if there is anybody in the public who would like to take this opportunity, I do not see the titles, so I don't know if anybody.
Nope, I can see everybody. There isn't anything into chat or anyone who's on the, that I can see. There's a lot of folks who are no video tonight, so.
Nobody. Okay. All right, well, if there is no further comment or questions or concerns, do we have a motion to adjourn the public hearing?
So
Bob and Jackie. I have 7:40. All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. So, after that, I'd like to call the regular monthly meeting of the Salem Board of Education to order at 7:40 p.m. And we have our consent agenda. Would anybody like anything removed from the consent agenda for consideration? Do we have a motion to approve and accept the consent agenda as presented? There's 5 sets of minutes, treasurer's report, conditions of accounts, and internal claims audit.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. We do have another opportunity as part of the regular meeting for public audience. If there is anybody in the public that would like to share questions, concerns, comments with us at this time.
I have received word that potentially the camera that is on Dave is the only one that the public can see. They're not actually seeing us.
That's okay. Nobody's just seeing.
Actually, they can see the top of Karen's head,
Great.
and they can see what she's writing.
I have a question.
Kristen Eastman has a question.
Kristen?
Last time I had spoke in support of the equity policy, and at the end I know it was decided to create an equity committee, but I didn't see that on the agenda today, so I was just curious of the process of how that committee will be formed.
In our agenda,
Yeah, the equity policy never made it on there as one of the, or equity committee as one of the committees that would be popularly recommended.
under committees, we will do.
Right, but it wasn't listed. All the other committees were, but the equity committee wasn't.
All right, I'm just looking for where that is. It's letter C under old business. There's a committees discussion.
Yeah, you can always have that.
And I intend to add that one to that particular discussion. So that will come up tonight.
Okay, I just wanted to check because I wasn't sure. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns? Okay. The next item is communication, and just so that people are aware, I did ask Dr. Glover to consistently post the monthly updates that come from schoolhouse construction under this section of the agenda, so that if anybody is looking for those monthly updates and see those pictures and see the different things that are occurring, they will be attached to that particular item under communication. So, but also give us an opportunity, Dr. Glover. We did have a tour of the work. It was great to see it. It was fun to see the changes that are happening. But Dr. Glover, would you like to give us everybody an update on the capital project?
Sure. Project is moving up very quickly as we approach September. Probably the most exciting of the work is that the playground is up. That's there. There is still some drainage work to do, and there's still some of the base to put down. But you can see it's up and everything's up in its all its glory, and it looks great, and it's very exciting for there. But some of the other places of new construction and reconstruction are also at various stages, but are approaching their completion, and we are generally on time with everything that's there. We are currently in kind of the sea change, if you will. We kind of geared up in March, and the school worked hard to get out of the way of the construction folks so they could do their job. And now as we're winding down the summer, they're working really hard to get out of the school's way, so the school, we can get ready to do our job in September. When the school year starts, there will still be work going on. It'll be done in shift work, as long as we are in regular type session or hybrid session as it occurs. So we will have some work going on in the day, but there'll also be work going on in the evenings here as well for the project, and that will continue through really through the school year. We almost have the primary building prepared to turn over to the construction company, which they will then take basically the school year to do the major abatement over there along basically the outside walls of each of the classrooms, which will be removing the univents, some of the stinky counter areas, and replace all of that. And they'll be putting in the new univents. Their goal is to basically have the primary school done this school year, with the exception of hooking up to the new heating system once that's ready, but that is really the big project for next summer. So we're moving along nicely. We're starting to see some progress in some places, which is fun to see, and moving right along.
Great. Any other questions or concerns? All right, moving on to old business. We have some items here. If there's no objection, I would like to combine A and B. Rollover of vacation time approval and appointment, adding Rebecca Quinn as a special education teacher to the CSC. Is there any?
Is A a discussion item or is it a?
A is discussion and action. It just needs some specificity from the board of what that action is going to be.
There has been a request to roll over some unused vacation time. Yes. By Karen McGregor.
Okay.
So would people prefer?
No, I didn't, I guess it must be when I looked at the agenda last week, I just saw it as a discussion item. I didn't realize it was also an action item. I apologize.
I don't know if the letter that Karen sent us was attached to the agenda, but we did receive it in a separate email.
Okay, yeah, I guess I just did. I didn't put two together.
So it did not get attached to the agenda.
No, that when we hadn't fully said what that was going to be said as, because the request was for the come back to the board's consideration.
So there's no objection. I'd like to combine them into one motion to approve the rollover of unused vacation time for Karen McGregor as requested, and to appoint Rebecca Quinn, special education teacher, to the CSE.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, 5-0. The next item is committees. It is a discussion item, and I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to everybody about committee assignments and how we can move forward. Dr. Glover had talked to us about a finance committee, but because we are a small group and we still have challenges meeting, I did feel that we are together as a full board for the audit committee. We can take that to be the audit and / finance committee. So if there are any financial discussions, it would require, full board action, to do anything. So I thought it would be good to be able to link up those two functions. We can maintain the current meeting schedule. We can notice those meetings, we can set agendas, and we can post minutes of those discussions. And, we would not have to make any additional appointments for another committee. So I thought, since we already are there, we already have those dates in our calendar, that, combining those functions would probably be very effective for us. As far as our standing policies, we have our policy committee, which was tasked last year with reviewing and updating the entire policy manual. That work has been done, and policy work is ongoing, but it's not it's intense level of work. So I did talk to Jackie Nolan, and I think for us, because we have the policy work that's ongoing and school plans, that I think we just need to, as stakeholder group here at the board, have more active role in, taking a look at those plans and being part of the conversations. I would like that committee to take on the ongoing policy work and the review of the school plans, and that would be myself, and Jackie has agreed to do that work with me. And we have the Standing Communication Committee, and I would like to ask Bob and Dan to continue in that role, to continue those, so I'm looking for a word, whatever your
Initiatives.
and thank you. Thank you for that word. Sometimes at the end of the day, those words, just the drawer doesn't open quickly enough. Thank you. Heidi, if you would continue as the safety committee. And at this particular point, rather than a standing committee, I'd like to identify the equity committee to be an ad hoc committee. And I think we need to task it with exploring and creating an equity policy that we can talk about. But I also think that we need to talk about equity practices as well. But I think our starting point is that policy, and that allows us to, move forward with many things. And I would like Bob and I to be on that committee. I have received at least 9 people have contacted me about interest in that particular committee. As soon as, we set a date that works for us, I will be getting in touch with those 9 people specifically and getting the word out to anybody else who might be interested in having a voice on this committee. So I think the more voices we have, the more robust our policy will be. So I encourage people to be part of this conversation. I do, just my own personal experience with the committees, I find that if we set a particular time, a date, a recurring date for the meetings, it made it easier to notice them. And people got used to, when we were going to meet. So I would like to do that if we could, look at a calendar that works for you and I and others to have something that we can anticipate meetings and move forward. And I do think that the committees, once they form, especially the equity committee, to define itself how it wants to move forward. I do think it's important that we do keep some sort of written record of the work that we do. I know that was very helpful looking back, where we were, what we did, what we needed to do, and Karen has been collecting those and making them part of our agendas so that people will see what we're doing. So if they can't make a meeting, then there is some. I can feel it on my back. The sun feels really good, but probably blocking what we can.
Oh, that was that one. It was that one was the big problem. Thank you, Paul.
So it's really, I don't think we need to have a motion to create ourselves, but I do think that the committee work has been beneficial to us. I think it's helped to move some conversations along at these regular meetings, and gives us an opportunity to focus on those particular items rather than a cursory look. And I think that's important for us. Any?
I agree completely. I think the this committee work has been, I think it's been great because it lets those groups do some homework and then bring stuff back to the board, so that's good.
So we will, Kristen, I will be contacting everybody as soon as we set a meeting date, and we still probably do have to talk about the logistics of how we will meet. We're just trying this for the first time to have the board here in this space, but I'm sure that we will probably have to figure out some virtual connections as well. And I am challenged in that regard. I won't really say that. So, but I'm definitely learning, and let's try to move forward with that. So, okay. So, any other questions or concerns about committees? Right, and the last thing under old business was the sale and disposal of district property, and this is a discussion and action. It is for, Dr. Glover has requested the authority for the superintendent to put up for sale and excising of school property for the 2021 school year.
So I had a question. It's going to be a little bit different this year than typical because there's going to be more stuff that gets excised and sold and gotten rid of. Historically, so what have we done historically? Historically, it's something that we've approved at board meetings, I believe, right? Is that what?
Yeah, prior to last year, there is a listing of the excise items came to the board would have that to review and then would approve or disapprove the excising those items. I don't think we've ever said no to excising some items. For their appropriate disposal is to the best interest of the district. Last year, because of the building project, at my request, the board granted me the authority to do that without that process in place, with the caveat that we would continue to maintain and retain those records. of those things that are excised in the event that we wanted to see, what's been excised, and I have that available for the board if the board wants to see that, it's a lot. That's there. With the project continuing, the thought process is the same. There's still a lot came and went last year in preparation for now, and the same will happen for this upcoming school year. For how we handle it, it's the same. For example, we have a series of copiers waiting to be picked up from a company. They had just had some folks in quarantine before they were able to leave again, so we're waiting for that. We have several of our older desks and chairs that have been in storage for years. They're now on their way to Africa. They've been purchased by a company that starts schools in Africa. They pick up the first batch because the van would only fit so much. They're going to come back later and pick those things up. There's other things that are broken and should have been discarded years ago. As we clear out spaces, because we've always been tight on storage. So that's really the request, is to be able to maintain what we did last year to help maintain the smooth operation of for the project.
Can I piggyback on that, Dave?
Sure.
The other reason that Dave had requested last year was because of expediting it, to get the stuff out of the way for the building project. So that was why, rather than realizing we needed it and then wait until the end of the month for a board meeting and then moving forward. Right now, we've been using Auctions International and moving stuff pretty quickly. So once he gives us the okay, it's the same form that goes before the board, but he sees, once he gives the okay, then Buildings and Grounds gets right on it and we can move the stuff faster.
I honestly feel a little bit remiss in not knowing some of this before, that not asking some of those questions. I mean, I think it's, we do have some duty to provide some oversight. And my thought is we probably can anticipate more than 2 days out what we're gonna have to be getting rid of. And I would like to know what we're getting rid of. I mean, I don't think that I guess I don't want to have to my thought is I don't want to have to request it. I guess every month I have to know what we got rid of in the past month, just because it's a lot of stuff.
But like not the granite and marble.
Well, since you asked me, you didn't know,
like
right?
that kind of stuff. Like,
Right.
I mean, I feel like we should keep it and repurpose.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that
Yeah,
stuff
that's
is.
not going anywhere.
Yeah, but just what I mean. If we don't know,
Right.
it could.
Well, I kind of feel like we haven't been doing our job. Okay, that all this happened and we sort of gave carte blanche and then just didn't think about it. And I guess I feel a bit remiss in not having, at least, not having requested it, just so I knew what we were and weren't getting rid of.
Yeah, I think maybe because we didn't get the notifications, what you had excised or sold, I guess I didn't know to ask the question, so about what had been done.
Got someone out of your mind when you didn't see it coming up.
You're right, it's interesting that you were using that, it's just, we were missing, the link was, you were bringing us the information when you asked us to approve it, but once we gave you the ability to do it without bringing it to a meeting, we stopped hearing that you were doing it. So I think that for us is, oh, well, there's more going on than we know, I guess.
Now, what I don't have any sense even order of magnitude of the revenue that we'd be talking about in the last year.
Oh, it hasn't been substantial by any means because.
Right, just order of
What's
magnitude.
it,
Like how many zeros on the end of the one, right? I mean, is it
And I wait till. I
hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars? I don't have
A
any
couple
sense.
thousand,
A couple thousand. Okay. I just don't have any
like
sense.
big old copiers.
Right.
Before we used that site, we couldn't even give them away.
Right.
So we were really kind of lucky that we actually were able to get something.
Absolutely,
You know?
no, 100%. And I don't mean to be critical of that
Yeah,
part of the process.
Right.
I mean to be critical of my part of the process of
Just knowing what's going where.
just having no idea what was going on with it, right? I mean, it's an income stream. I think we have some responsibility to have some sense of that. I mean, I don't know whether people, if people are comfortable with kind of getting an update monthly of this is what went out the door.
I think we should get an update.
I mean, if it
If you're
exists.
excising it, you have those records, you have those forms, you prepared the
Yeah,
statement
they're all
forms.
kept in.
And so that we don't have a pile like this, we can get a few every month. So that would be good. So, is this something that we want to move forward with, or do we want to maintain the monthly going over, or to amend it to a law as well, as long as we get monthly notifications of the items that have been excised or sold.
I mean, I think as long as we're aware of it, right, I feel like this is probably pretty helpful to get rid of,
Oh,
right? But I mean, I think we should be
Yes.
So
given
we're
the
doing our due
information,
diligence
yeah.
as well.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. I mean, I'm a little skeptical that we can't know far enough in advance to, right, I mean, I assume that we, you know, somebody could tell us what we're gonna have to sell in a couple months, right? As we know what the project is and what we're gonna keep and what we're gonna get rid of, but I don't have a need to approve it, but I do have a need to know about it. So I'm fine moving forward with it, I just feel like it's our duty to
To be aware.
be aware.
So do we have a motion to delegate the authority to the superintendent for sale and excising of school property for the 2020-21 school year, as long as we receive monthly updates of activity?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Business affairs. We have, let's see, okay, there really isn't anything here we can combine. So the first item up is acceptance of 2 bids that came in for the highest bids for 2014 Dodge Caravan at $2,353.99, and a 2015 Dodge Grand Caravan for $1,900. These are the ones that are being removed from the fleet, is that correct?
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We have 3 motions that we need to make as far as our school tax situation is concerned. The first resolution is to identify $564,902 as undesignated fund balance and apply $467,951 to reduce the tax levy. And there are also included procedures for notification and collection of the taxes, so it was quite an extensive resolution. We need a motion to act on that resolution. So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Okay, I'll call the roll. Pam Denigan,
Yes, aye.
Bob Sikoski.
Aye.
Heidi Kirschner,
Aye.
Jacqueline Nolan,
Aye.
Daniel Snyder,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
The second resolution for our consideration was the proposed equalized tax rates, the tax warrants, and tax penalties as proposed. We have a motion to accept.
Second.
Motion and a
Pam?
second. Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Heidi,
Aye.
Jack,
Aye.
Daniel,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
And the third resolution is to collect and transfer the funds for the Bancroft Library as proposed.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Call the roll. Pam Denigan,
Aye.
Robert Sikoski,
Aye.
Heidi Kirschner,
Aye.
Jacqueline Nolan,
Aye.
Daniel Snyder,
Aye.
motion carries 5-0.
The next item up for agenda is the district safety plan approval. Dr. Glover, I understand that no additional comments were received during that period.
That is correct.
So unless anybody here has any questions or concerns, do we have a motion to approve the district safety plan as presented?
So move.
Second.
Any further, any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Motion carried. Or opposed? I heard all the ayes, but opposed? No. Motion carried 5-0. The last thing under business affairs is the code of conduct approval. I will be honest with you, I'm not quite comfortable that we've met all of our statutory and procedural responsibilities as far as getting information out to the public and opportunities for feedback. So one of the things that I would like to suggest as we move forward with this conversation is that we do have the committee that we can move it to, and kind of give ourselves an opportunity to have a discussion at the board level and talk about those to make sure that we're good. We haven't actually passed the policy language yet for those particular changes. So that gives us a chance to look at it and bring it back in a time when maybe we can get more public input into that plan.
No, I strongly agree, because I think until it's in the policy, we can't actually have it in the plan,
Do that,
right?
you know.
So,
Probably technically we should not have put that before the
policy.
actual policy adoption. So that if we refer to that, to our policy and plan committee, then that will give us an opportunity to look at that and align it with the policy work that we'll do later. Does anybody have any other comments or questions for us?
I have a whole bunch of little ones that I can send to the committee for consideration.
Okay.
Just
That's great.
some of it's minutia, some of it's just some of it's the layout of that plan. I think the additions actually are very good, so that none of this is an indictment from my perspective on the work that Ms. Adams did at all. But I think that it is something that I've actually, I think on the public record show, I voted against approving it a couple times in the past, because I felt like it was an unfinished document. Parts of it, and I still feel like old parts of it are still unfinished documents. So, so I can pass that
People are
along to.
comfortable with that, so we will postpone the action to adopt. All right, moving on to instructional affairs. Ms. Vieira? She is there, I can see.
Hi, everybody. So, notes. There's so much that's going on, but I feel like I have minimal to report. So I'm going to give you the best of the best. So our BLPT team has been meeting every week for the last countless weeks. And what started as an 8 to 10 team has reached on some meetings over 20 people, with parents and specialists and PTA and a little bit of everybody being a part of the conversation. It's actually been really wonderful. And I think it's because of all of those folks that have participated that we've actually been able to see those ins and outs of what it's going to look like to reopen. Because everybody has a different insight, parental insight, the teacher's insight, the aides, everybody. So it's really been wonderful, and it's really been a huge part of how we are moving forward with our plan to open. Today we had a meeting, and it was great because it felt like we were on to just the smaller things, like how are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? So we really all, I think, feel pretty comfortable with a lot of the things that we've been doing in there and how we're moving forward. One of the big things that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks and, bringing ideas in and trying to figure out what to do. And we made the decision. The big thing about elementary is typically that meet the teacher night. It's that meet and greet. It's bringing the kid into the classroom. It's meeting the teacher and doing all of that. How do you do that with COVID? How do you do that when you're in the middle of a pandemic? How do you do that when you want to limit the amount of people you have on campus? Well, I had several teachers come to me and said, we did a drive-by goodbye. Why don't we do a drive-through hello? And it was really well received. The teachers liked that idea. We're not going to have supplies be brought at that point. We don't feel that that's safe enough. So it's going to be we're going to assign certain times like we did for the goodbyes. And this way the families can come through, the kids can say hello. Teachers can hand a packet over to them for, logins to their Google Classroom. Maybe some of the classroom rules. And one of the other aspects that they came up with, which I thought was another really great idea, was to do a personal welcoming video of themselves, introducing themselves, and maybe giving them a tour of their classroom, maybe even showing them where they would walk in the building to come to their classroom, because for a lot of our younger students, they're going to be in the main building now. So that's a big change for them. So we've really been kind of troubleshooting what that would look like. We're also talking about having classroom virtual meetings on that day so that all the kids can come together. We've also talked about parental support and doing some trainings for parents on how to access the Google Classrooms and to navigate the Google Classrooms, because for some of us as parents, our kids have definitely exceeded our abilities, but we need to know how to get in there. So there's been a lot of really great conversations on how to make that a reality and make this whole thing a very positive experience. Other than that, my other big news is people are moving to Salem. We have, from just this summer, we have 15 new students. 9 of them are kindergartners. So we've had I think we had like 3 sets of twins move in. I mean, we've got a lot of kids coming in. So we're excited about it, like bringing those numbers up. So wanted to share that. Other than that, it has just been getting ready for all of this. And, Julie and I and Dave, we spent a lot of time together trying to make sure we're putting everything in place the right way. So it's definitely been a group effort on this one. So do you have any questions for me?
Thank you, Karen.
Okay. That's it? Okay.
Ms. Adams?
Hello again. I think I apologize for the noise earlier. I'm on my laptop and the fan comes on and I think that causes noise, but it's off for now, so hopefully it'll stay off. So a very similar report to Ms. Vera. We have a lot going on, but we're still working a lot of details, and obviously we don't have a very firm calendar in place because we have a lot of what ifs and still waiting for some information and some guidelines related to our school calendar. But the first thing I wanted to say is that we're very appreciative. We've had such great participation and feedback related to reopening and developing our reopening plan. I just wanted to briefly, I'm thanking everyone mentioned to the board and our viewers this evening, the process in our plan development. So we, as you know, had a parent survey earlier in the summer, as well as a parent forum recently where parents provided feedback on our initial plan. We've also have a teacher survey. We've had 5 teacher reopening planning meetings with a variety of faculty, staff members. At those meetings, a lot of, as Mrs. Vera said, a lot of participation, a lot of people, taking time out of their busy summers to come in and participate. As well as I had a student forum as well. We had a very nice student turnout virtually. So in addition to then I said guidelines and all of that feedback and planning process, the other piece I wanted to share is that several of our teachers are members of some professional learning communities and have been participating in those over the summer. And I also administratively am part of a regional team that there's a lot of collaboration going on between the districts regionally, a lot of sharing ideas when we get stuck on, what is everyone doing in the cafeteria? How are people, working on solutions for students who don't have internet? So we're constantly sharing ideas. So I just wanted to share and show my appreciation for all the work that's been going on and all the feedback. And we realize that this is new. So again, this is a different process than the spring. And we've been fine tuning the plan based on our recent feedback. We know that once we get started, that we might need to fine tune again. And we really want to encourage all of our stakeholders to continue to participate and give us that feedback. Part of that will be is, so first of all, if you have not seen our reopening plan, we do have that online on our website. So there are the slides available as well as our video. Feel free to continue to email me with questions. We're finalizing the schedule. We have it just about around almost rebuilt. We anticipate that sending that out sometime midweek next week. So hopefully you should have it by the end of next week, at the latest that Monday. And after that, I will be taking more questions. I'm going to have a parent forum as well as grade level meetings right around that beginning of school. So keep an eye on the district newsletter. We'll have some more information with dates on those. Those will be virtual. I encourage, if you have questions, just want to listen in. We'll give you some final updates on our reopening plan, as well as take any questions that you might have. And please continue to email us as well. One of our challenges as well as, working on that 7th grade orientation, we recognize that such an important transition, that it's a big change and students get nervous. They're not sure what to expect. They want that opportunity to be in the building, to try out their lockers, to find their classrooms, to look at the schedule. And, right now we do have some challenges, not only related to the COVID guidelines, but also related to the facilities and capital project, and really having the building to be in a spot where students would be able to move around a bit to kind of explore those areas. So, stay tuned. We're working together. We're trying to get together as the team. It may be, we're not sure if we're going to be able to pull off the in-person before the first day. So we're looking at that. We're looking at possibly having a virtual, it's not going to look the same as a typical orientation if you've had other students in the past that have gone through orientation. But I think that we do realize that students want to see their teachers, see their personalities. It's not the same as in person. Get some information, give some information to families as well. So we're working on the details of that. So stay tuned. We know this is important. It's on your mind. We're just trying to figure out that kind of balance of what will work with keeping everyone safe. And so we hope to have more information on that in the next few days for you all. Definitely, hopefully next week. So stay tuned to that. And we'll probably send something out on email and or through the school messenger by phone. My last thing here is if you were not able to tune in last week to the high school presentation on the reopening plan, I did include just an update about athletics. I am occasionally getting some emails about that. And NISWA, so we're on what's called NISWA pause, and they have communicated, the last information was communicated that fall athletics were on pause until September 21st. That's their target date for the start of the fall season. But that's not necessarily the official start date. There is guidance from the state and that needs to be had. So the last kind of communication was going around is we're still waiting for confirmation on that date. And as soon as we have more information, we will definitely be getting that out to students and on our website. NISWA does have a website also where they have a dedicated COVID page. So if you have an athlete, I'm sure you might be familiar with them. And I will type it in the chat too. If you are able to view, you'll be able to see that webpage. So I know there's a lot of questions. The reason there hasn't been a lot of communication from the fall coaches and with the fall coaches is that we don't have a lot of information. And then once we start sending things out, it gets confusing to be, every couple of days or, changing the narrative or changing kind of the plan. I know it's frustrating, but we want to just wait until we have that kind of official go ahead. And we hope to have that news and information right around the start of school. And then we'll be able to work with the students while they're in person and back kind of in progress with instruction to communicate with them more details. So I did just want to let you know about that. So those are all of my updates, and I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Dr. Glover?
Good evening. We're reopening in 3 weeks. My thanks out to the building principals for the work that they're doing. It's a lot of work, it's hard work. It's work we haven't been before. It's a lot of times folks describe this process as, trying to fly a plane while we're flying it. I see it much more as we are in free fall, trying to sew together a parachute before we hit the ground in the dark. Because there's a lot of information we don't know, a lot of it's happening fast, and we're trying to make sure everyone is safe before the school year starts. So they're having a lot of conversations, and we are having a lot of conversations internally about how we can put those things together. Those things are coming together. 3 meetings last week with the community to share the plans and those conversations. Ms. Vieira had about 70 people in attendance for hers. Ms. Adams and I had around 40-ish for our different pieces. Our next meeting is actually tomorrow night for the community, and it's basically going to be just the overview, any changes that might have happened between here and there, and then basically people's questions, and that'll be really our 4th public meeting on the reopening plan out of our requirements. We meet with faculty tomorrow midday. It's an internal conversation just for our faculty and staff, so they have an opportunity to talk about the plan and the same type of information to get some feedback. But we've had a lot of feedback from faculty and staff and unions and really everyone involved in putting this together. It's certainly a team effort, and we're truly appreciative of everyone's efforts that are there. Along with kind of the reopening challenges with COVID, as I alluded to at the building project, we're in the process of getting the project to start getting out of our way so we can get things started in. Room moves are just about completed. There's some scheduling work the high school is still working on. We almost have the technology moved over so we can get installed here for smart boards for teachers, for those pieces to be into places. And once we have rooms solidified, we'll start doing those normal things of making sure everyone has their keys, making sure everyone has their extensions and voicemail and all those things that we do on a regular basis. Ms. Eastman and I are working on our newsletter to go out, which we hope to have out soon, as well as the opening letter that goes into there. So a time going on for the reopening to there. I think we'll be ready for the reopening. It's going to be a little harrowing because it's even different than last March, but I think that folks are excited to be here. And we'll just take each challenge by stride, and we'll adapt and overcome and keep doing it until we have a kind of a steady pace for what happens. We adapted very well in the spring, and I expect that we'll do the same coming in September. The other item for tonight, we're going to have a deeper conversation about it. Here's the agenda item. It's just the state budget. The state budget is not good. And with the state budget not being good, meaning that the revenue, every report that I've been receiving continues to be in decline. Just received one before our tour tonight, and it painted another not so happy picture of tax revenue that's coming into place. The state has started withholding 20% of any disbursement it needs to go out to. For there, we received some additional information on that. That anything that has a statutory piece to it will be released, but with a 20% reduction to it. Anything that does not have a statutory piece may be withheld in its entirety. We've asked for some clarification through our building aid planning service through Questar 3 BOCES. They have phone calls into the state because we're all asking the same questions, all of us being everyone in the state, all the schools, for what those definitions mean. And the state Ed Department of Budget is not giving us solid answers. Because I don't think they have them, to be honest, or if they do, they don't want to share them yet. That's there. It puts us in a precarious situation because, when back in 2009, when we had the Great Recession, we knew up front that you're gonna have a cut out of your budget. It's going to be $234,000. And we could mess with it right up front, we could plan with it right up front. It was a hard and concrete number. Right now, we have nothing that resembles a hard or concrete number. They can't even clearly tell us which aid is going to get cut and which aid is going to be released, when and how. We have, Karen did some sleuthing with some help. We have dug up some information on some scheduling. We're still working to put that information together because we're trying to get all these definitions put together to see what type of impact that may have on our overall aid picture. But the possibility exists that when we talked back in May about that big number of the 20% cut of everything being 1.4 million, is that might be the number we're looking at. We just don't know, and there isn't anyone who can tell us. The state is relying heavily on the federal government to bring in monies to help basically save the day. That's what the federal government did back in the Great Recession. We had GEA restoration funds, and they came in from the federal government, and they offset some of those other costs. That created other problems, but they ended up being down the road a little bit. The last report I read was that Congress left for its recess and isn't planned to be back until August. Well, it is August, supposed to be till after Labor Day, which means the next expectation for any aid that we might get from the federal government may not be here until October, November. We just don't know, depending on how quickly they act or don't act. It puts us in a very hard situation. I don't know if comparisons back to the Great Recession are fair, because just of the parameters we have to work for. We'll, in the upcoming piece, we'll chat a little bit more of how we want to handle that for there, but those are the two big things right now that are looming over the school, is being ready for kids and for opening, and then the funding piece of it, for the school year. That's all for now, unless you have other questions.
The word statutory, pretty much everything that we do is run by statute, so how can that be parsed out? I mean,
Well, there's some pieces where the aid is, where the legislature says that the school district will receive aid like by blank date. For example, I want to say we're guessing that lottery aid, and I'm looking at Karen, like lottery aid is the statutory piece. So the state that said that lottery funds will go toward education, and they have to receive those funds on a certain schedule, or by a certain time. So those funds we will get, but we'll only get 80% of those. So we can find what those numbers are, we can do some guesstimating what that is. We're guessing that foundation aid is statutory.
Oh, I see.
Right.
So not the actual
Yeah.
aid itself identifies, okay.
Right, but what we're not sure about are things like our categorical aid. So for example, things like textbooks and hardware and software, that may be, here's a certain amount of money for that, but how it gets broken down is at the state's determination. Like textbook aid, it has changed over the years. It used to be $32 a student, and now it's like close to $54.10 if I remember correctly. So that number may not be solidly in statute, this is what you get. And that's the part we're looking for, just try to be as accurate as we can, and in as big of a situation we're in. So we're working.
Karen, when is the next time that we would have received?
September.
September?
Yeah,
Would be
September.
Yeah.
The first one, and you don't have any idea what's coming?
No, they won't even, normally we have a schedule of what our payment amounts will be for the year. The state isn't even putting out a schedule this year. And I hadn't told you this, Dave, I did get a hold of Tom Hosey, who presented, our auditor, and he said the same thing Questar's telling us. He couldn't even give me any advice. It's like, we don't know. We're reaching out. I go, so if you can hurry up, wait. He's like, no. So.
Makes it really hard to plan a school year when you don't know when he's.
Yeah.
Well, like Dave said, we don't know what the basement is.
Right.
With the gap elimination, we knew what that number was.
Right.
And we don't know what this number is.
Okay.
And we don't know if it's a 20% reduction, or is it just a withholding with the promise to pay it back at a later date? And now,
Right.
Nobody did. Honestly, I've reached out to all of my people, all of my people.
Yeah, it is everybody.
It is.
It is everybody. It's statewide. It's probably farther reaching, probably in other states, but it's common conversation among superintendents in the region and through the state and from the, the major organizations and conversations with elected officials. Elected officials are able to give us a little bit more for structure, but nothing about dollars and cents.
Thank you.
I don't know if that's the right, but yeah.
Thank you
I
for
don't know
your
what the
report.
answer to that is.
Yeah.
All right, moving on, 7, Board of Education conference reports. I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity to
Nobody's
participate
anywhere.
in virtually any conferences.
I just think I just bring for the board's attention that, NYSSBA is virtual this year. Sounds like it's a 2-day, and you've been
It's over
getting,
2 weekends or
Yeah.
two different time periods.
yep, and you've been getting updates to it. If you do have an interest in that, just please let Gina know.
What we're getting is the preliminary, what I'm getting anyhow,
Yeah.
it's like the law and,
There's a pre-conference
the
seminar.
pre-conference
Mhm.
seminars. I haven't seen anything yet that has to do with the,
Me neither.
okay, so that's,
We did the paper version of our on board,
Yeah,
just came in, and it might be in there, I haven't read it yet.
I feel like it's concentrating on COVID.
oh, okay, I haven't
Really,
seen-
I mean,
The
I feel like,
pre-conference seminar.
is that what it is?
The
Yeah.
communication one is like,
Like
Yes,
crisis
yeah.
and communication, right? I thought there was other, then were they listing the 3 speakers on that then?
because
'Cause I
then
feel
there's
like
also
I
the
saw-
pre-law one, right? Pre-law one goes all day, and the
Yeah. I feel like
communication
they
one
were
goes
all-
half a day.
So I'm not sure.
Oh, yeah, no, any closer to
Moving on to personnel, would anyone like to remove anything from the personnel portion of this for a separate discussion? No? All right, then, if there's no objections, I'd like to group A, B, and C together. We have the resignation of Linda Beatty from the cafeteria, resignation of Cheryl Chambers for purposes of retirement, resignation of bus driver James Kennedy, and retirement payout for Scott Cameron. A motion.
So moved.
Second.
You're saying.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then we do have some sports-related appointments. We have E, F, G, H, and I. The appointment, one of them is a bus driver, not sports. Appointment of bus driver Steve Black. I understand that that's for Andy Isom's position. Is that the way it's looking?
Yes.
Appointment of the varsity girls track coach Maureen Keys. Appointment of varsity softball Stacy Rich. Volunteer approval for boys varsity soccer Chris Runhofer, and volunteer approval for varsity softball Jason McCullough.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
Any discussion?
Just a quick question, the winter sports coaches are not up yet?
We don't have it.
We haven't had anyone to apply to them at this point. They were advertised at the same time that the spring ones were. That were there. I don't know why. We didn't have any coaches come in, they're aware of it. That's there, and we did get a spring coach put in an application for track, so it went out. I even want to say, I chatted with Ms. Adams too, she remembered too, that an email was sent out as a reminder to those coaches. But maybe they're waiting and seeing. We'll reach back out. Every time we go through, we do another group. We'll reach back out to the groups and say, hey, in case you missed it, to apply if they're interested. And then we'll bring them as soon as they say yes or no.
Any additional questions or concerns?
So it wasn't that nobody applied, that you felt comfortable recommending, it's that nobody applied?
Yeah, we just got, everything that we got in, pretty much everyone here is incumbent, for the most part. Any that was there that we agreed to and put forward to you. There isn't anyone waiting in the wings.
Maybe they're just making some not happening.
And that may be, it's, the interesting piece, and I was actually talking with one of our wrestling coaches, because he coaches, good coach soccer as well, about if fall sports get delayed, he's gonna have a conflict in his coaching schedule, because if he coaches wrestling and he coaches soccer, and they overlap if this fall season gets there. So it's what happens, when we have coaches who are fall and spring and winter coaches, and they're gonna choose a sport, we just don't know what's gonna happen with that yet, so some folks may be waiting to see. I think another challenge we have athletically is some of these sports are going to be hard to social distance. You can social distance in practice, but for the fall, for field hockey, there's usually 3 girls right on top of each other trying to get the same ball with, and for field hockey. You get to 4, you're breaking the rules, I picked that up. But you get to 3, that's there. But soccer, you get kids going after the ball, they're going to be, you're not going to be able to keep that separated either.
In Vermont, they're wearing masks.
That's how they're doing it? But I don't know if you don't social distance wrestling. It's hard to wrestle
You can't do that.
socially distance. You can't even thumb wrestle social distance. Basketball, hard to cover somebody if you're staying 6 feet away from that person.
Don't shoot Karen.
So
Don't shoot that ball.
we'll see how that goes. All the big questions that are coming. But like I said, actually I see here, Frank says that all coaches submitted on 7/10. I didn't see that. I'll recheck with Gina to make sure that something didn't get lost in the mix. But they're being withheld for any reason other than there. To that, it just might have got lost in a pile, but.
Well, just there has been an effort to try to not, obviously August is long before, but we still don't have winter sports coaches, and we wanted to try to do it by May or June. And so I wasn't sure what the reason it hadn't appeared on an agenda.
We'll double check.
I hope it is just an oversight. We do have people who are interested and with however form it takes.
Well, I do remember seeing an email for the winter, it was spring and winter together, right, Dave?
Say it again, sir?
Spring and winter were.
Yeah, they were all together.
I know at least all staff, it went out in an email to all staff, and then Ms. Adams told us that Doug Mazzicki reached out to the people that were external, normally interested.
Oh,
So,
because if you're not a staff and you don't get.
right,
those,
you don't get the all staff, right?
You don't get the all staff.
Just a quick question. Did we do A, B, C, D, or did we just do A, B, and C?
We did A, B, C, and D.
Okay, I just missed the D part,
And
just
then
checking.
E, F, G, H, and I,
Yep.
the approvals.
Perfect.
Do you want to rescind your second? Are you good with this?
No, I just wanted to make sure, because I heard A, B, C, and then.
No.
All good.
Any other questions? No. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And motion to approve, the first approval for Trevor LeBlanc, and then a set of additional graduate hours for second approval for Trevor. So motion to approve those. Lady?
Second.
We need buzzers.
There you go.
Yes, got it.
Probably could be arranged.
Mrs. Sheldon used to teach, she used to have that in her classroom. We played the game, like the buzzer game, it was fun.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And brings us to new business, which letter A underneath that is budget status and the discussion of the impact here.
For the board, I think here's the big question. There's a lot of numbers from the state that we're receiving from there. They're just all bad. The question is how do we want to manage kind of our budget, not knowing how bad it's really going to be. So if we can determine where those statutory numbers are, those ones they say you will receive this money, but at 80 cents on the dollar, that'll at least give us something to start with. right? So we can say, at least we know we're supposed to get, let's say foundation aid, right? It's almost $6 million. So you're supposed to get about $6 million, you're going to lose 20% of that, what, 1.2, or rather, so we know we're gonna lose $1.2 million. We have to do something about that. So that's kind of the first part, and that's the part Karen and I are working on, is can we get something that's solid that we can actually say, this is the potential we're looking at. And then it's, how do we want to handle it? There's three approaches. I'm sure, or a combination therein, but I think there's three basic lanes that we need to kind of philosophically decide how we want to handle it. And then we need to do the work of, kind of mashing it together. One is write it out and see what happens, knowing that we could be in some pretty serious trouble with the budget. In that by not doing any adjustments to the budget, still, maintaining everything we have in place, and still funding things that may not have funding that go with them. And then bear the risk of not getting enough federal money to fill in that entire gap, and then know what our fund balance piece is, because we know what that is. And then at the end of the year, whatever it gets expended. And that number tends to be, Karen, you can help me here, because we usually spend somewhere around 95% of our budget. So if we, so that 5% left over usually is what, about a $600,000 number. So if that number stays true and we eat up all of that, and we eat up the applied fund balance we put in, and then how much of that unappropriated fund balance of that 4% gets used, then if we use up all that, then we've overspent our budget. And then, that's one of those things legally we're not supposed to do. Does it happen? Yeah, it happens. And then we get ugly audit reports, and we have different things we would have to put into place to protect that from happening in the future. But that's kind of option one, just write the storm out. Option number two is that every chance that we get is that we nit and pick away at whatever we can. So for example, athletics. We'll just use that as the example. That right now we know that we aren't transporting kids back and forth to Cambridge for football practice. So there's a savings. We're keeping track of that savings. We've already included this type of savings in this budget now. We said around $50,000 we're looking to save through that means. So it's like, okay, so JV sports right now, there isn't a JV girls or boys soccer coach. We generally don't have those teams. Can we go ahead and cut those though? What savings would that be? Are there other similar things of that nature that we can say we're just not going to fund this year? There are some things because of COVID we aren't going to, fund this year likely. And then if situations change, so it works out that we don't need an extra cleaner. Or a good example I'll use is we had to develop a new classroom for special education. We were able to rearrange teaching assignments and meet needs of kids to be able to create that position without having to hire a teacher. So that was that $80,000 in that chart, if you remember, that we've saved. So we didn't have to spend that money. So there's the savings there. And keep doing that as best we can to try to stay afloat, knowing that we're going to take some level of a fund balance hit. That we know that we're going to hit that appropriated fund balance, and those monies go into play, and hope we can stay ahead of it by nipping and tucking. The third approach is taking some educated guesses at what we think we're not going to get fund-wise, and then making some.
For the next few hours, there's no
I don't think, I'm not sure what that was. E.T. The third part is actually reducing programs or staff, not really preemptively because we're in it, but as a means to know that, okay, we know that we're looking at this $1.2 million. It's beyond difficult to nip and tuck away at $1.2 million. Usually you need to take broader strokes at it to get to those bigger chunks. And then what does that mean? And then look back to, okay, so here's where we set for our priorities for the board. this is what we want direction for the district, and then use those priorities to decide, to use my analogy, what goes in the shopping cart, right? So what are those things we're gonna hold on to? And not hold on to, but then have the conversations also of, there are some things in here that are important to us, but they're also not mandated. And so balancing the mandates versus the priorities, because when you start getting those big of numbers, that becomes part of the conversation too. But it's hard to have that conversation without numbers in front of us, and it's hard to have numbers when we're not sure what those numbers look like. So there's a little work we still have to do to have that together, but kind of as a direction setting, it's what do Karen and I need to do to be prepared, so since our finance committee is going to be a committee of the whole, that when we get that committee back together to have that conversation, what direction do we need to head?
Those are big issues. The next scheduled meeting for the finance audit committee is October, so we would definitely have to have something scheduled prior to that.
Right.
What specific steps have you taken to date to chip away at things?
To date, the teacher position that I just mentioned is one that's there. There were actually several in the building, the budget that we touched on, with like the cafeteria funding's been out of the way. We're currently looking at our structure for classroom aides and for bus drivers. Since when we're heading into hybrid, we're heading to a 4-day work week, which means there's a full 20% of the day, there's one full day in the week that we're going to not need a full workforce. So we're looking at how we can readjust that workforce to fit what our need is for the school year, and then adjust positions accordingly. First blush looks like we'll be able to make some adjustments there and put a savings too. I just don't have a number for you yet, because it involves special ed and both the principal schedules that they're working on following. As they get more solid, I can get more solid, and Karen can give me more solid numbers. So we've looked at those pieces. There's a lot of plans that we had put into place that we're not going to do. Like we had hoped for some overlap with a mechanic. When that happened, we just said no to that. That's there. With the COVID coming up, we had, I floated the idea of maybe bringing in a second nurse as an overlap. Budget's not going to allow that to happen. So that's going on the hold for those pieces. And we're continually looking at those types of things as they present themselves and move forward. In the cafeteria staff, there was going to be a need for an additional person, because we have to feed kids in 2 locations now, both remotely and in school. But we've, Wendy's decided we can do this if we go to 5-hour positions for the.
Just to interrupt, like the nurse position, so can we handle all of the COVID, like screening, all of those things with one nurse to be able to get by, even though?
We're going to have to. Okay. Yeah. There'll be some administrative assistants in there to be able to help with some of those things. But yeah, that's going to be the part. The part there for the COVID piece is there has to be a coordinator that the county will work through, and I designated myself for that. So the nurse can worry about kids and health, and I can worry about, all the government stuff and contact tracing and those things. So we'll leave the nurse for the kids, and I'll worry about, the bigger picture for the health and safety pieces. So we're doing a lot of that type of work now that's still within the budget and still adjusts, but what we're finding out is those adjustments are saving expenses. They aren't necessarily reducing our budget, if that makes sense. So where we thought, for example, in the special ed, for that special ed classroom, we thought that was going to cost us $80,000 for a teacher. Well, it's not going to now. So we aren't going to increase monies by $80,000. We don't have to spend that extra money.
So was that $80,000 actually worked into the budget? I didn't think
No.
it was. It was not. So it's not really a savings if it wasn't there.
The tuition should be a savings though.
Yeah, some of the tuition pieces may work to be the savings that are in, but that's the point I'm actually making, and it's not a savings. We're preventing extra expenditures. Yeah, we're not reducing the budget. So we're not saying that we plan a budget for 14 million, and by these things we're doing, we're able to bring it down to 13.9 It's that we have a $14 million budget, and we're preventing it from going to 14.2.
And just to interrupt you a little bit,
Please.
not to mention the expense for the COVID, that wasn't budgeted. You know, I'm buying masks and gloves and cleaners and stuff that was not in the budget. And also the WebEx I was on with BOCES and the state aid people that were talking emphasized it's a minimum of 20%. A minimum cut of 20%, not 20%. Depending on the state's revenue, it could be greater, or depending on the feds, it could be greater. They said that, I don't know if you've heard that, they said that more than once in ours.
The first I heard that being used was with universal pre-K. Because at one point, we have several schools in the area that are universal, we are self-funded. So with the universal pre-K, they weren't releasing that money. And so it's not a mandated, it's grant driven. So there were some conversations in some school districts about, do we maintain it? Because if we're not having the money coming in for the program, then we're not going to have the program. And I think most schools are looking to hang on to it because the promise has been made about the 80%, but some of those programs aren't gonna last all year. You know, there'll be a half-year program, or they may delay and wait and start the second half of the school year for the program. That's there.
Well, I have to say, and I didn't get an opportunity to talk to you earlier about this because this was a call that came in just before the meeting, but I did hear that you weren't just looking at staff reductions, that the word has gone out that there will be staff reductions that will affect people's jobs and benefits.
Without going too far, I had a conversation with the union president about the possibilities, and that got relayed out to the unit members is different.
Because that is not something yet that has been
And
authorized.
I'm in full agreement with you, but I didn't.
So it was pretty much, I knew there were lots of options, but options need to be vetted. So I think that maybe some things need to be repaired. There, things where we stand. I mean, we have not made any decisions yet, have we, about impacting people's jobs, livelihoods?
Because
or insurance.
A full restructure would have to come to the board.
Right. And just in that case, if somebody was reduced to the point that they would no longer, be qualified for health insurance.
Right.
They would still receive their retirement benefit, but not the health insurance benefit. How does COBRA play into that? And is there any negotiation? I mean, there are a lot of questions to answer about how we would notify people and how the benefits, they don't necessarily have to go away. I mean, does COBRA still exist? I mean, is that something that?
And how quickly their benefits end.
It's 18 months, it used to be 18 months.
Yeah, COBRA is always an option, that's always an
But
option.
it's,
So, I mean,
I think it's limited though,
It is
the time, right?
Oh,
They can't
yeah,
go.
absolutely, they can't go on forever, and,
Yeah.
and our plan for some units is a very rich plan. and
Yeah, It's
prohibitive.
102%,
So,
that's what they pay.
Yeah.
So it's not.
but as
But I
to
mean,
speak
I
to
think
your
we have
question,
language
the
there.
benefit ends when the eligibility ends. So when they are used, then
Say that again.
Right away.
the
Right
benefit
away.
ends.
Yeah, you could tell them,
Right, I mean,
tell them tomorrow
Yeah,
and
just
tell them
like the
tomorrow.
coverage begins immediately, we don't have a grace period that you gotta work your 90 days before you get any benefit. It's immediate, both ends.
With COVID, it's not a great timing for something like that to happen.
but no notices have been given, nobody has.
No, I haven't
No.
received any confirmation of anything. Last I heard, they're just looking into things, so I haven't even run numbers for him. So I think, and anybody that's asked me, I say nothing has been set in stone yet.
I think,
This is
we
the way
have
it's rated, I
many
guess.
hard conversations to have
Mhm.
about, what's the sense in your superintendent meetings? I know that writing it out is not a good option. Yeah,
Right.
That's, for me, that's, what
Too risky.
A, B, and C, it is too risky. What are other schools schools our size, Or is it just like every plan that I look at as far as reopening is different, the
Mhm.
response to this is different? I mean,
We're all in very similar boats. Folks who are our side, I mean, it's a lot of, like the pre-K example I gave, are many schools that are our size. You know,
they
it's,
have universal pre-K.
they have the
ours is
funding,
a little bit
right.
different.
So for there, they have the funding, so that's the part that they're looking at through. Some places have already made some reductions, and other places have not necessarily yet, waiting on some things, or holding out a little longer. So it varies a little bit by where some tolerances are.
But it isn't really the same everywhere, because if you look at a school like Granville, they're so dependent on state aid. And then you look at a school like Lake George, and they get almost no state aid, because they have such a tax base. So really, it's hugely different from district to district, depending
Right.
on, you take 20% away of a not very big number, and it's not that big a deal. You take 20% away of 65 or 7% of your budget, it's a huge deal.
But when we're talking about similar schools, it would be similar. Like George, I don't consider a similar school. They have too much lakefront, just like I want to compare Bolton to us.
100%.
You know, they're all lakefront, that's there. But, when you talk about Whitehall, Granville's a little different, but you talk about Argyle, or you talk about Cambridge, or you talk about Whitehall, or, or Hartford, you look at those schools, we all kind of have this, we're somewhat similar enough for what's what.
Because schools our size did the same thing we did, which was to pass a budget based on the state aid
Right.
numbers that we were given in April,
Mhm.
because no
That's
one
all we
knew.
had.
So if we're all in the same,
And I think it's important to remember, in that budget we put together in April, we had already reduced, it was like, what, $368,000 to get to that budget already. So we already took, $250,000 out of the budget to get to where we were for that budget, back in March, that we ended up putting to the voters and passing. So we've already taken a big chunk out of the way, and now we're still talking about another big possibility. I agree with the board that, I don't think writing it out is advisable. There is too big of a risk to it. The other part too here is, if you remember back from the May 5th presentation, when we talked, they gave the comparative charts on, here's what it was to World War II, here's what, just the kind of the different times where the economy really went, like the Depression, the Great Recession, and all those comparatives, and I put COVID to it. In those charts, it talked about, it was around the 2022 first quarter. I just saw a number today that was pushing it off even another year. So instead of being the 21-22 school year, they're talking 22-23 school year before things kind of got back to normal, kind of pre-COVID situations. And that will change depending on how cash receipts continue to come in or not come in. And what happens with federal funds and in those pieces. We just don't know.
This wouldn't solve, everything of it, but is there something, we talk about, what is gonna be reduced of coming in, is there something that we could do to bring in increased revenue somehow? Even just thinking out to save some, I think you can't make up 1.4, 1.2,
Right.
You're probably not gonna do that, but is there something that could be done? Selling
There are
strong
ways to
masks.
increase.
I don't know, just as a.
Bob, could you model yours for us, please?
Yeah.
For folks?
Yeah. Or.
Yeah. Say.
Purple's great.
We've had, conversations here, Bob's brought about, about the tuitioning piece, about how can we get, freeness to non-resident students and to those pieces, and then the aid that comes with that is for ideas, and that marketing piece and conversations is part of that communications, as you know,
Right,
a part of the communications conversation that's there. I think it'll be interesting to see what some of Karen's work and our investments have done. Because the end class that the board approved for us to do the investments there had carried much greater interest than it had before. And when you take the great interest rate we just got on all of our what we took out for the building project, and we set that in that investment at 2%. 2% of 13 million is a decent number. So we'll have some money to work that will help us in some of that revenue piece.
Well, that money has to stay in capital project.
And it has to stay capital. So, but even so, that helps protect taxpayers for when we have to start paying off. Now we have money to do that. So that's a down the road protection that would still be able to go. In other places, but one of the things we try to do is how can we garner as much aid out of many of the expenses as we can, and that tends to happen through BOCES. So it's the more that you share those positions and use BOCES as those opportunities, particularly for like overhead cost type things, that we get about 50%-ish, give or take a percentage depending on the year, back in a trailing year. So for example, Amy was on here before. Our communications person, we pay a certain amount for her. We get about half of what, up to $30,000 or $35,000 of her salary. We get half of that back, so it helps generate a revenue stream. And if you look at our budgets over time, you can see in a couple places where it's our expense aids that have really been driving our aid. Transportation aid has been quite a bit, and the BOCES aid has been those other pieces, because as we're using those expense-based aids, you get more money as you do more things. So if we keep putting more of the things that we already do into that, we aren't increasing our expenses, but we're increasing our revenue. Challenge. It's trailing, but it's not current year help. But the challenge this year is the brakes are coming on that too, because it's still state aid in the end.
So I do think that we need to, with fresh brains, take a look at this. Maybe more than we can take and chew on, but everybody think about that and set another time to meet as the finance.
I think that's really important, and I do think today to remember we are going to a 4-day schedule. So that's an important piece of this.
So we have to start factoring in those things.
So what happens, just playing devil's advocate here, what happens if we come into January and there's a vaccine and we're all going back full time? Then what do we do?
Then everybody's cash flow picks up and the receipts pick up and possibly.
And we're able to hire people back.
Yeah, and if we hit that V-shaped curve, and the economy piece, and it all comes back and the state's able to catch us up, I would think that, superintendent-wise, we'd lobby hard to allow for some overlap between budget years, for us to be able to make some things up. And I don't know what that would look like for there. So we can kind of take those losses and carry them into 2 years, so they're remade up. There are conversations about letting us use reserves for those pieces, but have to pay them back in 5 years.
With interest.
Yeah, not that you really want to do that, but at some point it turns into any port in a storm. If that's the mechanism they give us, we'll see where that goes. But if it comes back and all of a sudden, we're back into it and the state fulfills its promise of this is a temporary withholding and brings all that money back to us, we're fine.
Has there been any discussion at the state level for New York to do what California was suggesting, is that they borrow the money, the state itself, to pay off the schools, so the schools didn't have to take a hit in the calendar year that they were?
I haven't heard anything of that.
No, just curious, because
No.
I thought that's just a bigger set of shoulders to take on, but,
Totally with you.
but, so we will set a date to have it done. Okay.
We'll, as we get better information or more information or something more solid, we'll let you know.
Okay.
So, so we can, when we have the fresh minds, have the conversation, we also have some fresh numbers to look at too.
And I hope we will, what Tom has said, and our accountant has said, hopefully within a few weeks, we will have, and I'm like, a few weeks.
I feel like that's what we were
A few
told back in.
weeks.
We've been talking about this
Well,
since
May.
Yeah.
That for my chair is a bit that's frustrating, because back in April, I gave you 2 very different budgets, right? And here's the budget where I think we can go, and then the next one I said, this is what happens if the world caves in. And then it was like, wait a minute, what's this budget? It's scary. It is scary, but this is the budget that happens if the big bad wolf shows up. And I think we wisely went with the right one. We didn't have solid numbers to go on. to there, and I think that carries the wisdom of the day. It's like, let's have real numbers to act on. And we were promised to have real numbers at the end of each look back period. We were supposed to know what was going to happen, and we have never been told that. And our next look back period's in December. We're almost at the beginning of the school year, and they're, you know, they can't tell us how much money they withheld from us yet if they have. So it's frustrating in that end, but.
So a couple quick questions. You said 4-day, expand on that a little bit, so the ramifications of
They have
that.
students here 4 days,
Right, right.
a week.
And so the
So I'm
ramifications,
just thinking support staff wise, we're not gonna have buses out as many. We
Right.
probably will have some special needs out on a Friday, but we need to look at the whole schedule.
Yep. So, I mean, the other piece is, personally, I wouldn't be surprised if we have students here from September 14th through the fall, right, to Christmas time. And so in the event that we don't, what does, just looking strictly at the budget piece, does that make things easier? Or does it make things easier?
We will have still instruction going on. So, I mean, that piece wouldn't change anything necessarily. Because that instruction, though, we're only gonna have 4 kids, 4 here days a week, there's still instruction going on 5 days a week.
Right.
You know, so to that end.
So that piece doesn't change?
Yeah, so that piece doesn't change. Does it change in other ways? Maybe. It depends on what the closure does.
Busing, aides, those.
Yeah, and those types of things. But remember, back in March, we had some mandates. You know,
Yeah.
at that point, we had to feed everybody. You know, so, and it was everybody. So we needed drivers, we needed aides, we needed cafeteria workers, we needed cleaners, you know, to be able to help to do all those pieces. You know, there was daycare concerns.
I mean, I'm okay with any answer, I just didn't know if we had sets.
Yeah.
I mean,
No,
I'm just trying to understand, is it,
we just don't. It depends what they force us what to do.
Yep.
I'm trying not to use the word force, but
No,
you know,
but, yeah,
basically.
The
we can-
mandates have always been unfunded
Yeah.
for the most part.
Oh, sure, and yeah,
That's just the way the
Nature of the beast.
nature of the beast.
Well,
yeah.
it seems that if we do close, they would go back to those mandates. They're still gonna want you to feed people, we're still gonna need to.
yeah, very well, and that very well could be the case, and then it's, you know, might we do it differently that way? Well, maybe we go to the bulk feeding and, you know, and do it once a week rather than every day, too there, but the everyday feeding was very helpful to families from feedback we got, because it helped provide normalcy to the kids.
Well, that's true. Now, over the summer, you went to a weekly?
Yep.
Which you call bulk?
Yeah.
That seemed to be well received though, right?
From what I heard, I haven't had a nitty-gritty conversation with Herb about it yet. I heard positive, that it did go well, but Herb and I just haven't had a chance to sit down and talk about how did it really go, what was the feedback you got, and those types of things. Yeah, we'll have that conversation.
But nobody said no,
Yeah,
right? So hopefully
Yeah.
that is a.
I didn't hear anyone get thrown out.
Sometimes news is good news. If everybody's happy, it just, it's a positive thing, so. All right, so we will continue, this will be continued to be a work in progress, and at this particular point in time, if somebody says something, there have been no changes made to budget staff or whatever, okay, good.
I guess before we move on though, when you talk about option 3,
Yeah.
reducing programming and staff, how do you do that after we have already started?
That's hard. It's hard.
I mean, that's what
Yep.
I think of first.
And
Is our
that's,
students, because I mean, that's who it's gonna directly affect.
absolutely. Also, once you get to a certain point, you start losing what your savings is.
Mhm.
Like, you know, over the summer, for 10-month staff, you still garner all that savings because we haven't started. But, you know, AB kids have already started, they've already started their work.
Yeah.
So yeah, it becomes very hard because you have to adjust schedules, you have to change kids' schedules, you have to, make other
Unless you're
adjustments.
virtual, it's probably easier if you're virtual than if you're in person, I would think.
I mean, I feel like that would
But
be
even
harder.
like teachers already have a contract at this
How do
point,
you,
so then they start, and then you have to go against that contract, so is there payout on that contract that they've already started,
It's
or?
just a salary agreement.
The salary agreement for where they are, but if the layoff is required, then it's there. But probably the closest example I could give is at one point we had a teacher a couple of years ago leave, like about this time. There was no warning, no nothing, just I'm already gone and I'm not coming back, and have a great day. So we scrambled the best we could to get something together, And then after some time, came to the realization that this isn't working, we have to do something different. And so with that kids, the department helped step up and took care of the mandated pieces to take care of that. The non-mandated pieces, we readjusted the curriculum so the kids at least retained half their credit for that, but luckily it was an elective course, so we could do it. So the kids had that half course rather than a full course. And then we made sure we made up for the other pieces. But no, that's the closest example. And it would also depend on, if we ended up having a mid-year reduction, where that reduction came from. The more solid a teacher structure is, the harder it is to do. There, where more flexible schedules, you might have more opportunity to be able to retain more of those services, though they may look different.
Yeah. I mean, I just think of an elementary classroom, and that's pretty.
Current.
Yeah, for
Absolutely.
kids. So.
Absolutely. This is where I go back to, if we knew this in April, at least then it's no easier a conversation.
No.
It's no easier conversation, but at least we know, and we know up front, and we can handle it up front, and we just haven't been afforded that.
There's a lot of.
So Karen and I will keep looking and getting information and put it together, and when we think we have enough of a critical mass, we'll let you know.
Okay.
And then we can schedule something that makes some sense where we can get back together and pull out our calculators and our sleep protectors and our green, visor hats and ticker tape machines. Just let me get, Karen can bring her ticker tape machine.
I'm not listening.
And we'll crunch some numbers.
Lots of pencils and erasers. Karen.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well, moving on. Non-resident student tuition request, we've received a request from Karen Keith for her child to attend Salem Central School for the 2020-21 school year, and for the board to waive tuition as according to policy 7132. We have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. We did receive a donation from the Salem PTA for lanyards. I understand from Ms. Vieira that the lanyards are created so that the kids can keep their face masks attached to it, so that nobody drops them or uses them or leaves them someplace, which I think is, I do that.
This is a good
all the
idea
time.
for me. I
Yeah.
think
We'll see what we can do with Nancy stairs.
So,
I want one.
I've been back to my car many times.
do we have a motion to accept the donation from the Salem?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
And thank you to the PTA. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0. We also have a scholarship approval on the agenda tonight. The Abrams Business Award Scholarship, which used to be in existence in a slightly different form, I understand, but this is, to breathe new life into that, and it's a very nice thing. So, do we have a motion to establish the Abrams Business Award Scholarship?
So,
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried 5-0.
Dan, make sure you get in the minutes. They're quick, they're drawn.
I got a couple of things.
And we have proposed changes in the 2021 school calendar. It creates superintendent's days at the beginning and restores the parent conference days in November to full day. And we still have a little bit of tweaking left to do, I think.
There is. For here, with the changes that are coming up, teachers need time.
Oh, yeah,
We need time to enough and prep. I mean, even outside of how we're going to do this hybrid thing, we have a couple other issues that we need to talk about in preparation for the school year. There, and that's for the 4 days. It seems to be a more common move among school districts.
Oh, I think it's a good thing to get
There.
everybody in and talking about how to proceed, because you do eventually want to focus on education.
Yeah, As I do plan on bringing the conversation, this is a half-year change. I do plan on bringing it back to see where we are about half year, to see what the second year, half of the year does. Current schedule does currently list 179 instructional days. That is that one March WADA day. Already in conversations with WADA about that. We're basically in agreement there on some pieces. So I'm confident that that won't be an issue. We'll get to our 180. Remember, our current calendar is tight on snow days anyway. Still listed 184 days, but of those days, 3 of those were superintendent conference days, and 2 of those superintendent conference days took place before snowfall. So we only
Remote learning taking over snow days, like if there's a snow day, could you learn remotely and count that as attendance?
We're having conversations.
I just think that is hard to ask someone. So if I taught in this school, I don't get very good internet. So for you to require, and for attendance purposes of those students, right? I mean, they have to attend and log on, and I have to take attendance in eSchool or whatever program you use. Right? So I just don't think we should say we can do that.
That's where there are conversations. So Tech High, at one point, that's what their snow days, I don't know if they still do it, but at one point, that's what they did. Of course, like I said, Tech High is a high school, so it's a little different. But that's why we're still having some conversations. I think the one thing that I probably can speak for most, if not all, is that we weren't really thrilled about losing April break. So if we can find a way to retain that break in there, even, because it's stressful, so those breaks are going to be important this year. If that helps for a solution, but to your point, how is this going to impact kids and families, and how are we going to help them to be able to adjust to there is certainly a conversation point that we'll need to have. But that's where it is. We will have 180 days of instruction. We will not lose a day of aid. I will put my stamp on that to make sure that happens. And then just everyone really pray for a really warm winter. So we don't have to worry about snow through there. So everyone go buy new studded snow tires for your car, and that will guarantee that we won't need that. But for the change up front, I think it's going to be important for a good start to our school year, and then we'll tweak the calendar as it goes along.
What does the Farmer's Almanac say?
Do we have a motion to accept the changes in this school calendar as proposed?
So moved.
Any further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. And the last item is the Board of Education student member. It's an item for discussion. We had brought it up earlier, and it's just something that if people have had an opportunity to think about it and want us to pursue it, I would refer it to the policy committee, because the first thing we would need to do is create our own policy that would allow it to happen and get ourselves ready. It is something that, and I don't know if you were part of this conversation, but they would be able to have a voice at the table. They would not have a vote. And they would not be able to go into executive session, but it would also be something that we would have to put up to the public for vote too. So we have some things that we need to do to get ready for that. So if people are interested in pursuing that, we'll refer it to the policy committee.
I think it's an awesome idea.
Right, good. We do have some policies. We have 3 policies that we've been looking at. Exit interviews, the policy for code of conduct, and use of surveillance cameras. And we have just tweaked the language on those three policies. So do we have a motion to waive the second reading of the policies and adopt policies as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on the policies? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Topics for future board meetings.
Budget.
Budget, yeah. And I would like to talk to everybody about setting a date for a board workshop to review our own board self-evaluation and district goals. I think that we put a cap on it, maybe a couple of hours, but I think that we should take a look at those pieces. take a look at our district goals, and we have been providing goals from the elementary and high school. It'd be nice to look how they line up. And we were very ambitious when we set those goals, and so maybe going through and looking at them over the year's time, we can focus them as needed. So, does anybody have any preferences as to when we do that? You guys that are heading back to class, do you want to do it before school starts or our next?
I start Monday.
I don't know who's gonna start it yet. Wow, that's right, okay, well, that's, yeah, so, so,
I can be flexible.
okay, right, so we'll try, now, another thing is that, we could have the option of having it, a virtual, conference, like, well, we did the NISBA, conference like we did when we did our goal setting. We could try to look at that, but that would be, something that we would have to set up, I'm sure it would be virtual, or if it was just something that we thought we could do with our own evaluation and the goals that we've already created, to do it ourselves, if we're comfortable in that regard. Do people have any thoughts about how to proceed with that?
I guess my first thought, and I'm not married to this at all, but my first thought is that could take a crack at it ourselves and feel like if we, right, and we kind of had laid some groundwork last year with the person in this book. And we're gonna have more flexibility in probably do it sooner that way. And then if we feel like we come out of that feeling like we don't quite get what we want, we could always lean on this, but
Help us.
to help us. I mean, I'm open to either one, but that occurs to me as
No, I was gonna say the same thing. I feel like we could maybe give it a go. And if we fall on our face, we ask for help.
It's always learning's good. So, all right. So what we'll do is we'll try to put our heads together and try to find a date and time. Are you comfortable in this situation? If we came back to this?
I am.
Yeah, that's fine.
Right, so we can do that. And does anybody else, besides the budget and the workshop, have any other topics for future meetings? I think the budget looms large. At this point, I'd like to, if we still, I can't tell, I just, the boxes that are on the.
I can see here, it's got 15 folks signed, so.
Okay, I'd like to open it up if there's anybody in the public who has any questions or concerns or would like to share anything with us.
If you'd like to go ahead, just unmute and, or type it in chat.
So, may I ask, were people chatting with you? You did say you got something from Frank, is that?
Yeah,
I
I got a couple of things here. Mr. Fraunhofer had said, we sent it in and sent it to, and he actually resent it to me. So I have the wrestling one for the coaches there. And I'll check with Gina to see if we just put it in the wrong folder or if it's something I missed.
Is there any other comments or anything?
Julie Dorshield asked about title funds. If they were considered, whether they were all intact or not. We think they're all intact at this point, but we just don't know. But those were the couple questions that we got in as things came.
Yeah, people that talk to me that they should be intact, like David, I talked because they're targeted monies, but right now anything's on the table. We're doing our due diligence and applying for all the grants we can, so.
So do you have any idea whether we are going, the grants, I know you have to have applications in the middle of the month.
I got the 611, 619 in by the end of July like I was supposed to, and we finished up the CARES Act one on the 15th.
And I'm working on the Title I's now.
So the CARES Act, is that something that it's confirmed that we will get that money, or is that something that New York State is gonna?
Well, it's a grant, so it's approved.
Yeah, if it's approved, we'll see what they actually give us to there. That's,
So you don't know what that dollar amount will be?
back in the beginning, the governor had said any federal money that comes in will be basically swapped to replace whatever got withdrawn. When we built our budget, we didn't plan on that money coming in. So this is additional funds for us, which is a good thing that we have those additional funds. So with the additional revenue in, that's helping us do the covering of some of the COVID costs that Karen had mentioned, of the PPE and the temp stations into there. That number, was like 124.
Yeah, and 24 cents if they get.
Yeah, it's right around $124,000.
The two combined.
It is almost identical.
I was gonna say, it's not the same money,
Yeah.
is it?
No.
Our state's not gonna take.
It's almost identical to what they took away from us.
Right.
So I'm thinking that's too coincidental for them to say we're taking 123 away from you, unless we get federal money, and then the federal money comes in almost at the exact same dollar amount. So my guess is that is our swap. So I'm gonna guess we're gonna see all that money.
But they make you work for it.
Yeah, but it's a guess. I could be completely wrong, but that's my guess.
It's not bleeding, that's good.
Yeah, I'll take 123,
We'll take it, yeah.
thank you. It's that next payment that is, we'll see,
But that's September, correct?
yes.
So is there any other?
I think the only thing I would ask is just how did this setup work? You know, we had a couple link issues that we'll get unhammered, but I think that's just in case we put out 5 links in 2 days. You know, so that we got a little crowded.
So I guess I would like to have a Chromebook in front of me next time so I can see that screen up
Agreed.
closer.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, and I will make sure, I told you I would get you the thing, and I forgot that folder. So I will get there and we can make sure the computers are in here so you can, you know.
So
And not that it's not nice to have Julie
Should we
going
bring
up big
our
up
own
there.
computers, or do you
Well,
want
I
us
feel like
touching
that
other
should be
computers?
it,
What
so
do you
we
want us
can
to do?
Well, that's fine. If
Yeah.
you want to bring your own computers in, that's fine. If you want to bring in school computers, we'll just make sure they're clean before you get them, and then we'll leave them here and we'll clean them before we put them back into circulation. For their,
So our own computers will work?
yes,
Yeah, that's what I used when I had a vote. I brought my own computer.
Okay.
but and part of kind of the overall technology things we've been working on, one of the things we've been working to develop is a public network for folks to bring their own devices in, and we now have that set up. So when we start in the year with the remote learning, if we have kids who have their own devices that want to bring them in, they can. We can put them on the school network and not have access to our sensitive information, like our student management system and those there. But they can still have their device. They can still get to their Chrome pieces. They can still, you know, do all those things that they need to do to get their academic work done. So yeah, so we can get you into the network. We can get you into the network. And
I'd like a Chromebook,
okay,
a school Chromebook for the next week.
okay, we can.
But you like the setup? This works?
Yeah.
But
I do.
this works okay?
Yes.
Okay.
What did the public think? I wonder if the public has any comment on how this worked for them. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Anybody want to talk?
We didn't have.
Becky Quinn says congratulations to Ms. Chambers. Frank says it would be nice to be able to see more than 2 board members on the video. I'm not sure if it's possible. Can both the cameras be used? Frank, I am not sure with that.
You mean you want to see Dan?
Well, there's Dan, wait, Dan. Frank, I need to talk with Dave Ashdown a little bit more on this because the WebEx is not exactly coming through the DL like it would for a class. We're kind of tricking the system a little bit. So I have a little playing to do, but we'll see what we can do about getting cameras to work.
If Jackie and I said you can set this up.
Yeah.
I think the answer is you would have a Chromebook with a camera on it and the camera on, and then turn the microphone off so we can get feedback, and
So
then use
they
the
only
room
hear us here.
acoustics, but they can, everybody can
So
see
we would
everybody.
be a little, we would
We'd just be
use.
another, yeah, just like,
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
So, yes, I would use a Chromebook too in that situation.
We'll have enough Chromebooks for everybody.
We can do that.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Because the other piece onto this, like on the setup, we haven't done it yet, but we're looking to possibly change this to a panelist format. And what that does is all you would log in as panelists. So you can talk and when emails, you know, people can email you questions and we can all see that as panelists. but everyone logs in as mute, and we can still control, they raise their hand, it gives us a little more control for folks who want to talk, but it puts you right up kind of front and center. It will look like that to other folks, but you should be able to see everybody, but I haven't played with that version of it yet. But yeah, we can get your Chromebooks in here so you can log in, so I can tell you right now, I can see Marcy, this classroom, and Ms. Adams. Everyone else has their off. Marcy says some is off a little, some are louder than others. And Marcy, that's probably those of us who are louder hit the microphone better, because the microphones are in the ceiling.
I mean, we can make any adjustment.
Yeah.
So Anne was the quietest. I sometimes had a hard time hearing Anne. It sounded like she was in a giant room instead of talking into a microphone. So maybe I think that.
Yeah.
She's one of the farther
Thank you
ones
for
away.
the feedback. So having the Chromebook in front of, but that wouldn't change the
No.
microphone.
We can inch you forward so you're
Yeah,
closer to the mic.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Maybe we could put Anne in the middle here so she's
Yeah.
Yep, that
front
could
and
work
center
too.
of the microphone.
And also, I
Yeah,
have
there's
to
a
admit,
five.
there isn't anybody ever called me soft-spoken. Thank you.
Marcy, she's very happy you called her soft-spoken.
So we will try to have, those
Yeah,
keep
we'll-
improving our technology response to this.
Yep. And then, yeah, we can absolutely do that.
Because as a finance committee, we would have to do the same thing, and even our board workshop, we should be doing the same thing so that people can see what we're doing. So that gives us a couple of opportunities,
Yeah,
maybe before, or at least, before, at least one day before the next meeting.
We may have for and I don't know, it depends how quickly my office gets done. We may have another option in there because we're going to put up in there a Cisco board into that conference room so you can do this type of a thing in that conference room.
We may not be able to get all of us in there.
But
we'd all have to have masks on.
That would be the problem with this time for that.
Right.
And we'll just have to pay attention to scheduling in here because this will be class-based. As the school year starts too, so.
Right, but I mean,
we'll
we
see.
definitely wouldn't schedule something in that time. So.
In the evenings, we're like at 6, we're fine.
Very good. All right, so if there's no other business for the regular meeting, do we have a motion to go into executive session for the discussion of the employment history of a particular person? So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So, Dr. Glover, you said that
Yeah, I'm actually going to have y'all move to the art room.
Was that you, Heidi, and you, Jackie, for motion and second?
Yes.
yes.
Thanks.
Oh.
I was just curious.
Like, wait, did I?
Yeah, sorry.
I heard you, Dan. I heard you, Dan. You tried. I actually wrote Dan down.
David could probably try.
So we will return here to.
Yep, we can return right to here. Let me go get the, let me get the other space open for you.